That's okay. All right, guys, we're now okay. So back to my full screen. All right, let's do this. So everyone, today we're going to be talking about, you may have seen in the, in the schedule that we're going to be talking about business ethics, management, and corporate governance. I know that the people that came up with the topic were aware that there's, that these topics, business ethics, management, and corporate governance, are linked. And it's something that I'm going to keep emphasizing as we go along in our discussion today. I must also mention that we'll have an opportunity for breaks because this is a long time. So in between, I'll allow us to have a few bathroom breaks if we must, or reply a few urgent messages on our phones. So that's really, really fine. So along the way, we shall do that. So let's start. So we're going to start with a story. This is the story of a business. It's not factual. It's fictitious, but it's going to help us learn. In the case study is this. The business is called Wezi Enterprises Limited. The company is incorporated in the Republic of Uganda as a private limited company, limited by shares. Babiri and Nakato are the shareholders. They have hired Kato and Waswa as directors on the board of the company's on the board of directors, sorry. Waswa also serves as the company secretary. Their business is a supermarket. Kato is trained as a lawyer and Waswa as a teacher at a secondary school. They are both now 23 years of age since they're twins. Since the company's incorporation in 2015, the company has not had its annual general meeting, except for the first statutory meeting mandated by the Companies Act. As such, Babiri and Nakato do not know much about what is happening in the company, save for the annual dividends they each receive. Kato and Waswa have not provided financial reports for all the 6 years the company has been operational. All requests for financial statements by the shareholders have fallen on deaf ears. Babiri and Nakato have heard that the company's directors are earning from the company far beyond the remuneration agreed for the directors. Kampala Capital City Authority has also now approached the company over its garbage disposal methods, which have resulted in a stench around the company's offices. The directors have refused to attend meetings convened by KCCA for this purpose. The Uganda Revenue Authority is also displeased with the company's inability to file tax returns for the past 3 years. The directors each have complaints against them before the Anti-Corruption Court on charges of embezzlement, money laundering, nepotism, and bribery. For all the aforementioned reasons, Babiri and Nakato have now approached investors to take over the company, but before that, are pondering how best to ensure that Wezi Enterprises Limited cleans house, because they have heard that investors will not fund a non-compliant company, and for that reason, one which is not following standard corporate governance standards. They now seek your advice on a way forward. So that's going to form the backdrop of our discussion. It is, like I've said, it's fictitious, but to be honest, it's this is a situation that so many companies find themselves in. So I just thought we'd use this in learning about business ethics, management, and corporate governance. So please have this in mind. We'll come to it along the way. We'll keep, reflecting or going back to this case study. So, jot down the major things that you've noted. I'll be happy to go back to this slide if need be. So let's get on. So before we talk about businesses, so business ethics, management, and corporate governance, In my view, it's important to know what kind of businesses you can set up in Uganda. I know many of you already have businesses, so this is just going to be us running, going over what business forms you can set up in Uganda. So we start with sole proprietorships. Why it's important to know the business forms is to understand. Later on, you'll know that they are mandatory corporate governance standards for particular types of businesses, while some businesses are not mandated by law to implement corporate governance standards. They just can do it out of goodwill or out of a need to be organized, but legally not required to do so. So we'll look at sole proprietorships. For those who may not know, these are businesses. This is a business owned by an individual. Often it is only registered as a business name, so does not have what we call in law corporate personality, meaning that there's no distinction between the owner, the business owner, in the company. Yeah, they're one and the same. So if the organization has creditors, the same will what? The same will be, they would go for the owner's property. So, however, in companies, you know that the company and the owner are separate entities. So that's one of the key business forms you can set up. It's usually good for, say, setting up a small business where you probably don't have huge startup costs, and the business is localized. It's not you're not expecting to expand very, very fast. Maybe it's things like grocery stores, this type of retail shops. This is a good type of business form. But the bigger you get, then your needs change. So you could either set up what we call a partnership. Partnerships, we have different types of partnerships. We have limited liability partnerships and general partnerships. So these are entities where 2 to 20 people come together and sit and own the business together, share profits and losses together. The entity could either be can be a body corporate or not. By body corporate, as I mentioned earlier, we mean that it's a distinct entity from the owners. So a general partnership is not distinct from the owners. The owners are liable to creditors, individually liable. Whereas if you have what we call a limited liability company, partnership, you enjoy some of the rights that companies enjoy. That is being a body corporate, sue and be sued in its own name, own property in its own name. Partnerships are good, especially for bringing together different expertise in order to provide, especially for the service industry. So things like law firms, medical practices, business advisory firms, actually venture capital firms, private equity firms are usually set up as limited liability partnerships. So that's a good form for such kind of businesses, especially in the service industry. Companies are the most common form of business entity. They are divided into private and public companies. Public companies are those that are listed on the stock exchange, and they basically have opened up their ownership to the public, meaning that they can have in Uganda, they can have 100 and above members. For example, MTN Uganda is working towards becoming a public company, or it's actually done that. So it's now listed on the Uganda Stock Exchange. So that's a public company. Then we have private companies, which is the most common form. These private companies can either be for profit or non-profit, or can be a hybrid, what we call social enterprises. So yeah, so those are the types you can set up. For profit companies, definitely they are for profit. So if you your aim is to put in money and you have a desire to to get a dividend, then you'd want to do a company limited by shares. If then companies limited by guarantee are usually charities, foundations. These are used to advance social causes, but not necessarily for profit. But then additionally, we have what I've mentioned, social enterprises, which are a hybrid in the sense that they can declare a dividend, but at the same time can also advance social causes and try to address problems in communities. So yeah, that's those are available to you. Then we have other types of business entities. I'm going to run through them very fast because I know most of you know these things. I'm just emphasizing so that when we get to discussing business ethics and corporate governance, we understand the superstructure. We have a superstructure under which we are, discussing those topics. So we also have what we refer to as cooperatives, savings and credit cooperatives. These are basically cooperatives are set up under what they call the Cooperatives Act. These entities are used to group people with similar businesses to advance their collective needs as a group, the needs as a group. That is, for example, say marketing produce or marketing services. It is really about gaining from a unity, say numbers. So there's strength in numbers. So when people come together, then they're able to benefit from things like economies of scale. As farmers, they can market their produce and get a better price as a cooperative. They're able to protect their interests. So that is used in Uganda, for example. These cooperatives exist. There's some in Bukisu, especially for coffee, some in Western Uganda around Kasese, especially around coffee, since coffee is our main export product. But I know that these cooperatives were very, very vibrant in years past, especially during the, I think, Apollo Milton Obote regime. But yeah, they are very, very convenient way of marketing, especially in agribusiness. We also have another form of business entity called collective investment schemes. These are provided for under the capital markets laws. They include things like unit trusts. They include things like collective investment schemes. That's also a name for a type under that format. So they allow people to come together, pool resources for the purpose of investment. So you come together, set up this company, then invest in things like land or agriculture or maybe purchasing whatever. But whatever, you can trade, you can come together and put your resources, but they're regulated by the Capital Markets Authority. So there are different types of companies under that. I'll be happy to discuss those in details. Should anyone need, you can contact me later. Then we have trusts. Trusts are a type of business entity. A trust is used especially mostly in estate planning. If you have property and you want to have the same managed on your behalf or on behalf of, say, your children, a trust is a good form. This is where you have someone called a trustee, appoint them, give them powers, limit their powers to whatever. pay them a fee, and then they are accountable to you. And at a stipulated period or whatever, they're able to hand back the property or hand the property over to people that you appoint or you elect as beneficiaries of the trust. So they're used a lot in financial transactions, in estate planning. It's a nice form. It's easy to set up. You can set it up either as a contract or you can also incorporate it. So it's an easy form. It's cheap if it's just a contract. Yeah, then I see Godfrey says he's leaving. Okay, that's okay, Godfrey. Then the other, you shall get the recorded version of it, of the session. Then we also have clubs. Clubs are a type of a business form or entity, such as things like Rotaract, Rotary, Lions. These basically are set up to advance say objectives that promote things in, say, science or development in community. So you can pick an area, say, we're going to focus on eliminating, say, river blindness or some kind of disease. So these clubs, so people come together, professionals or people with similar objectives come together to advance a cause. So like Rotary, that's the best example I can give. Then non-government organizations, I'm sure we're familiar with this type. There's so many in Uganda, but basically these are companies limited by guarantee, but also registered as non-government organizations. And their work is to basically, in a way, complement the work of the government. So the government's role is to provide social services, but sometimes, especially in Africa, we have a deficit, say, in the budget. So individuals, private individuals can come in, put themselves together, register with the government, and be given permission to address or what we would call intervene in particular areas. So it can either be HIV/AIDS, like TASO Uganda, or like it can be, let's see which other, can be in governance, or human rights, like a whole host of organizations, Foundations for Human Rights Initiative, etc. The other type we have, not so common, is building societies. These are really set up to manage real estate. It's not a very common form in Uganda, but in the UK, it's very, very, very common. Used, say, like, in real estate, construction and the like. The other type that we have is, finally, is unincorporated ventures. So sometimes it's not necessary to set up a business. You could just sign a contract, have a joint venture agreement, and it's just be a document governing your relationship as 2 to 3 people or more. So this is usually done, say, for short engagements. If Roy, for example, Roy and I want to work on Pitchfest, for this month, we may not need to set up a company to do that. We could just sign a contract and say, I, Moses and Roy, are going to work together and share, have discussions around Pitchfest, and they're going to have the Pitchfest on 25th of November. So that's really it in terms of business forms. I thought I'll just provide that foundation as we discuss. I don't know, are there any questions so far? Does anyone have a question? I'm happy to take a question at the moment. You have a question about these types of businesses? You can unmute and then, yeah, Veronica, please go ahead. Yeah. Veronica, please, you can go ahead and unmute and then ask your question. Yeah.
Yes, good morning.
Yes. Sorry, I can't exactly hear you clearly. Sorry, Veronica.
Sole proprietorship.
Yeah.
Of late, URSB has something like SMC, single member company.
Yes, sure.
And these companies registered, and actually they are limited.
Yes.
And actually it has been some bit of challenge to me. I realized, I don't know, I actually still don't get it myself, that these SMCs are limited by shares. So throw some light on that.
All right, that's good. That's thank you. That's a good question. So you noticed I was actually doing this. I was kind of like running over. I've seen a few other questions. I'm going to answer them. Yeah, I was just going over this because they were not the gist of today's discussion. But I realized that if we don't get it right, we will not have a very. I mean, it can affect the discussion going forward. But yes, it's true. There's a type of company called a single member company. It was introduced by the Companies Act 2012. So it's now about 9 years since Uganda allowed such type of companies. This type of company seeks to address the issue that sole proprietors faced, which is that the business and the entrepreneur were one and the same. And especially when it comes to, say, the enforcement of rights by creditors, you'd find that this individual would be liable. So you find, their personal property like cars, houses are attached, although the debt accrued or arose from a business transaction. So in order to address that, following what had happened in the UK had already introduced this concept like a very, very long time ago. The UK has what they call single member companies. This company is a sole proprietorship, but with a corporate personality, meaning that the individual and the business are separate. So one person is shareholder, is director. However, they are required to have what they call a nominee director and an alternate nominee director. These are two people who will step in the order I've mentioned. Should this person, say, die or become of unsound mind, just to ensure that the business remains a going concern, even if this individual dies. So it is like a sole proprietorship, but with the rights of a company. It's a good one if we're going to talk about that even along the way. It's a good one if you want to enjoy the rights as a company. But as we go ahead and talk about corporate governance, we see that investors generally, because of course I understand that the purpose of this meeting is to prepare each of us for the 25th of November, which is that we want to make our businesses investable and bankable, isn't it? Investable, bankable, that's what we want to achieve today. And where there are no checks, what I mean by checks, like where there's seems to be a monopoly in decision making, a lack of democracy, investors usually put question marks and say, hey, but you're the sole director here. You make all the decisions. Is my money safe? So that's usually what I ask people that come to me to. In fact, even today, I'm registering a single member company for a client. But I did mention to him and say, is this what you want? Are you looking at raising capital later? But the good news is that it is possible to convert your company with minimal hassle, but with a bit of expense. You can convert your company from a single member company to a private limited company. So that shouldn't be a worry. If say like this person, this client that's setting this up, at the moment he feels like he doesn't have anyone he can trust to work with him. So at the moment he will register as a single member company. Then later we'll upgrade it. I don't know if the word upgrade is the right word, but we'll convert it. Let's use the word convert. There's nothing wrong with a single member company. It's not like a downgrade. But so that's very, very possible. I saw someone also asked and said, oh, so what's building society? Like I said, building societies are types of companies that allow people to collect funds for the purpose of construction or real estate, hence the word building societies. So it's like a specialized company for real estate construction. Basically, that's it. It's very common in England. It's not so common in Uganda. So we have those. Without if there are no more questions around that, we'll just go on to the next. Remember, we're going to make this as conversational as possible. I do not want to be lecturing, because these are things you could have gone on YouTube and discussed, and watched. But I would like to, yeah, Emmanuel, yeah, you have a question? Yes. Yes, Emmanuel.
Good morning.
Yes, Emmanuel. Good morning.
And a pleasure to meet you.
Pardon?
I'd asked to know about companies that are referred to as companies, the ones that end with understand it.
Sorry, your network is a bit scratchy. Could you mind repeating the last words? You want to know about which type of companies?
Okay, there are companies that when they're writing the names, it ends with the INC. I presume that is incorporated.
Yes, of course it is.
How do they operate? What are they?
Okay, so basically when you register, I'm using the word register loosely, but if I was speaking to, if I was before a court, say the Commercial Court of Uganda, they would ask me to distinguish between registration and incorporation. So incorporation means a company has been made a person in law, meaning that it has become its own person. And this concept arises from in England in the case of there was a famous case in the 19th century, a case of a gentleman called Solomon, and this Solomon had a business which was prosperous. It was a furniture business. It became very, very prosperous, but he owed money to some people, and he failed to pay that money. So these people, his business failed to pay that money. However, these people now went to his house and wanted to attach his personal effects and property. So he quickly ran to court and said, you know what? I am distinct. The owner and the business are distinct entities. And the court agreed with his argument, saying that whereas the business owned the, had debts with creditors, the same debts could not be enforced or could not be paid off using the owner's personal property. Give an example of, say, Donald Trump, how he's had his companies bankrupted. We all know about that. But his personal, him as a person remains liquid. So the concept incorporated shows that distinction. It shows basically when you say I'm incorporated or Inc., it means that you are telling the public that your entity is separate from you. You're showing them that it's an individual, it's a person of its own, it can sue in its own name, it can be sued in its own name. So that arises from that case of Solomon v. Solomon in the 19th century in England. And LLC also means the same. LLC, but with a slight twist. Limited liability company, LLC, means that the shareholders have agreed to pay only a particular sum of money should the company owe anyone money. I.e., that means when you're setting up your company, you have a form called the Statement of Nominal Capital. In there, you mention that the nominal capital of the company, and also in the Memorandum of Association, many of you have signed these documents if you've set up a business before. And the Memorandum of Association, you're saying the company is starting with 1 million shares divided into 100 shares of 10,000 shillings each. When you say that, you're basically saying that the maximum, my liability as a shareholder is limited to 1 million shillings or to the equivalent of shares I hold in the company. If I have 20% shares in a company with 1 million shillings worth of shares, it means my liability is 200,000 shillings because it's 1 million divided by 20. So that is what I would owe any creditor, and I do not go beyond that. So that is my limitation, hence the word limited liability company. But there are also companies that are unlimited, so that you can also have. So I didn't get into the nitty-gritties of all of this, but I'm happy to discuss anyway. There are also companies that are with unlimited liability for the shareholders. So sometimes there would be a requirement, say maybe by a financier or by people that the company is dealing with, for the company to have unlimited liability. It's a form of security to the creditors, because if you limit your liability to say 1 million shillings, then obviously the creditors will know that if they are to lend you more, there's no guarantee that you'll exceed just 1 million shillings. So that as a form of guarantee, we could say we want to deal with an unlimited liability company. So there's that. So depending on the industry you're in, depending on who you're interacting with, the format will depend on the desire of the different stakeholders or parties trying to reach an agreement on a transaction. Yeah. So I hope I have answered clearly on that. I do not know if that is okay. Yeah. Are we together, everyone? Let me know if I need to move a little faster. I'm happy to, because we still have time, to be honest. So I'm just happy to go along and try and explain as much as I can. So I think I've already talked about companies in Uganda, divided into public and private companies. These companies are considered also local or foreign, or holding or subsidiary companies. These terms mean a local company is a company that is incorporated in Uganda, and where Ugandan nationals hold a controlling interest of, say, 51% of shares, or the majority of the directors are Ugandan. They hold the decision-making power in the company. A foreign company is one where the decision-making power lies with non-Ugandans. Yeah, that's a foreign company. A holding company is a type of company that is set up in what we refer to as a group structure. It's common in for expansion purposes, where you have multinationals, you have a company operating in different parts of the continent. This business, so it has different entities. So you have one in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Rwanda, in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, in Ghana. So you have these different entities, and you want to be able to effectively manage them. This is also part of corporate governance, So you want to effectively manage these. So you consolidate your interests into what we refer to as a group of companies. That's why you have, for example, Proprietorship, yeah, Proprietorship group of companies in Uganda, say owned by Sudhir Proprietorship, or you have let me pick another group, Alam group of companies, the famous Alam in Bugolobi. So these so basically you can set up a group structure, and so you have a company called a holding company. This company will be the mother company and to have interests in all these baby companies. I want to use the word baby. Allow me to use that. Yes, we have these all babies. Yeah, it will manage all these babies in Kenya, in Rwanda, and it will have an influence on how the decisions. It can appoint local directors, but can also manage from a central point. So that's a holding company, and the company which is managed by a holding company is called a subsidiary company. So I hope that's clear. Someone is asking, Moses, thanks for the intel. However, why is it that whenever we need external financing, the financial institutions make us sign personal guarantees, yet there is supposed to be limited liability? Exactly. So to answer this, Jesse, thank you for asking this question. The reason why that happens is because they're basically trying to circumvent that legal provision. The provision saying that the company and the owner are distinct entities. So the reason why the bank would ask you to sign a personal guarantee is so that they can legally enforce against you. Otherwise, without that document called a personal guarantee, they would not be able to sue you as an individual. Yeah, either as a director or shareholder. So that's the rationale. They are just trying to go beyond the law, and it's very, very legal. So long as you accept, if you sign it, it means you're accepting that you're accepting to be personally liable. But if you choose not to sign it, then you know, the principle that was enacted in the 19th century, Salmon versus Salmon, stands. It stands, and that's why these banks are very, very smart. So long as they do it without coercion, without undue influence on you, it is a very legal thing for the banks to do. And true enough, you usually sign because you need the money, but you also have the choice not to sign it. So I hope that answers you, Jesse. So going forward, let's move on. Like I said, I really want this to be as interactive. I really want you guys to ask me as much as you can. So the next thing now we're going to reflect. What type of business entity have you chosen and why? Some of you have already talked about this, but feel free to like share. You can put up your hand. Maybe we can take like 2 people for now. We can take like 2 people, 2 or 3 maximum, to just tell us why they chose out of the forms that we've discussed. Are all of you companies, or do some of you have a different form of company? Feel free to like share your thoughts. Thank you, either on chat or you can just raise your hand. Thank you so much. Anyone want to share? Okay. All right. Okay, that's fine. I think that is really, really clear. But you can keep reflecting on that along in case you want to talk later. That's also fine. Keep reflecting on that. Next thing that I would like us to look at is let's look at who are a business's stakeholders. So we've talked about businesses, the kind of businesses that you can set up, you know, in Uganda. But would like to, you know, a famous person, John Donne, I think, said that no man is an island, meaning that you set up a business, so as you can interact interact with community, interact, i.e. provide a service, or provide, you know, products. So you find that through that interaction, there are different people who have a vested interest in your business or in your existence. So either directly or indirectly. And who are these people? These people are referred to as stakeholders. And these, for a business, generally speaking, this is a this list is not exhaustive. So you know, I just want to mention stakeholders that are key, because this is important as when we discuss, you know, business ethics and corporate governance. You see, in a business, we have shareholders. These are the people that own the business. These are the owners of the business. Basically, you get shares, maybe you own 90% or 100% or 40% or 30% or 2% or 1%, whatever, you're a shareholder in the company. Then on top of that, we have employees. These are people that work for the company, either as part of the management team or as directors in the company. So these are, these are stakeholders in your business. We also have competitors. I know some of you are saying, but what? Yes, they are stakeholders in, they're part of the community. They're part of the ecosystem that you operate in. So that's very, very, very important. The community, definitely, these are usually probably your customers, people that have an interest, the government, customers, government, churches, whatever. But yeah, the community encompasses all those people, all those classes of people. I mentioned customers separately. Yeah. So community could be, customers are part of the community, but I've also listed them separately because later on we're going to see that, when you look at ethics in business and you look at corporate governance, that they play a key role, or they are, very, very important stakeholders. So other people that you should consider, suppliers. So you buy raw material from some people. Yeah, so that's it about stakeholders. We're also going to look at the hierarchy of authority in a company. So remember, we've already talked about a company being a distinct. By the way, we shall take a break in like 15 minutes, just so that people can, if you need to go to the bathroom or anything. So at 10:15, we shall take a break. But we have a company, like we said, is a distinct part. It's a person legally, but whereas it's a person legally, we know that this company cannot think for itself. It cannot do things. It is us human beings that need to operate this company, So for all intents and purposes, legally, we recognize it as a distinct entity, but that's only a form. So in order to, so it's inanimate in that sense, in order to animate it, to make sure that it interacts with the community, with all these different stakeholders, that we give it life. So who are the people that give it life? And these are the authorities in the company. Basically, we have shareholders. Shareholders are the highest, they're the supreme body. They own the company. They appoint the board of directors, which is the second level of hierarchy. And then the board of directors appoint the management team, who then manage the employees. But back to shareholders. You become a shareholder by signing the memorandum of association or the constitution of of a company. If a company is a non-profit, the shareholders are referred to as members. So shareholders are, for a company, limited by shares, one which is for profit, but a non-profit would have members. And these usually meet in a meeting. We're going to talk about their meetings. There's an opportunity for these people to have a say in how the company is run. And that opportunity is usually provided for in what is referred to as an annual general meeting. Yeah, an annual general meeting. So that's where they meet, scrutinize the financial reports that have been prepared by the directors, ask questions. Hey, why is this? What's our strategic direction? Agree on things such as appointment of directors or dismiss of directors. If directors are not performing, they have a say. Or at that point, they validate the business plan, the strategic plan. They look at all those documents and ask very, very, very important questions. Yeah, and the directors are supposed to answer those questions because they are the ones that are involved in the strategic management of the company. So shareholders, yeah, they evidence that your shareholder includes your name being on the memorandum of association and articles of association. Also, your name being on the form of registration of a company as a subscriber, And most importantly, what the courts use as evidence would be what we refer to as a share certificate. So usually when you buy shares, like say in MTN, you get what they call a share certificate or a share warrant. So it can either be a share certificate is when you've like fully paid up. A warrant could be like, you've gotten shares in the company, but you've not fully paid up your shares, and the company, you owe the company. So the company can call on those shares anytime. So that's evidence of indebtedness to the company. Sorry, you there? Pardon? All right, sorry. So that is it about. Okay, I think someone needs to mute. Yeah. Oh, okay. Let me mute. Sorry. All right, there we go. I think Roy, I'll probably need your assistance with that. I'm a bit not the greatest at multitasking, but so shareholders. That is it about shareholders. They are the owners and they are the supreme authority. Then secondly, we have a board of directors. The board of directors can be the shareholders, or it's possible to be a shareholder and also a director in the company. That's not prohibited in law, it's allowed. Or the directors could be persons that are not shareholders, appointed by the shareholders. So these are usually people with like expertise. So if you're doing, you have a business in the food industry, you could have experts in the food industry, but it's recommended to have, that's what we're going to discuss today, it's recommended to have a range of what? A range of skills and qualifications. So yes, Susan, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you so much, Moses. I was asking, I have two questions, yeah?
Yeah.
The first question is, how do you select the board? Would you have, can you help me on the criteria I should use to select a board and how much money I could pay them? Then the other question is about shareholders. If I no longer need my shareholders, they had equity in my business, and we have agreed that they should leave.
Yeah.
How does that process happen?
All right. Yeah. So okay. So appointing a board, the legal requirements for the board directors provided for under the Companies Act. One of them is the individual must a director cannot be below age 21. So it has to be someone 21 years and above. The rationale for this is they want someone with the ability to take decisions, someone with good judgment. So the younger you are, it is presumed. I'm not saying that all young people cannot, be good judges, but I'm just saying generally, the general understanding is that the older you get, the better your judgment is, because experience is a great teacher. Then the other standard is that you must not be insane or of unsound mind. Let's use the word unsound mind. You should be someone that's okay mentally. But it's okay, like for example, if you feel unwell for some time and then recover, then you can become a director. But while you're unwell, you can't be a director. Next thing is also persons of good character, good conduct. That means that people that have been adjudicated as bankrupt are not allowed to be directors. The insolvency law does not allow that. Does not allow you to be a director. And also depending on the type of business that you're doing, the standards are more stringent in businesses or industries that are considered delicate or sensitive. like the financial sector, the insurance sector, the financial sector, for example. We'll talk about it later. I have actually a few notes on that. In the financial sector, you can see that it is a requirement for directors to meet what they call a fit and proper test. That is, they look at your finances, your criminal records. Have you ever been? If you have a criminal record, you can't be, for example, a director in a financial institution. Yeah. If you've been been taken in on any offenses provided for under the Anti-Corruption Act, any corruption-related offenses, you cannot be a director in a financial institution. So it becomes, so the criteria, is more stringent in sensitive industries, especially insurance, in Uganda, insurance, financial sector. Yeah, I think those are the ones that are really, really, really strict. But that said, there isn't really like a criteria. But today, what we want to discuss is corporate governance and the standards that are recommended. Now, I've talked about the legal standards that are in the law, but there are those that are outside, the law, which we call good practice. So corporate governance is both provided for in the laws. But in Uganda, which you shall see, in Uganda, corporate governance standards are mandatory for public companies. They're provided for in the Companies Act under a table called Table F. It has all the standards that companies must follow and even lists the requirements for appointment of directors. However, private companies are not subject to follow those rules, but good practice, especially for people like yourselves who are planning to, scale and get investors on board, would want to set up the standards because they're just good. It's good to have democracy. It's good to have a board that is accountable. So those standards are provided for in different legislation, both legislation, but also just reports, both locally in Uganda and internationally. So we're going to go through the international provisions, and it's actually what I want to share with you today, basically going through and saying, guys, for us to be competitive as Ugandan businesses in order to attract investment. Last week, I was reading some reports of how a lot of investment goes to companies in Nairobi, in Kenya, than in Uganda. And and I was thinking to myself, no ways. I want to make Ugandan entrepreneurs more competitive. We need to have our affairs in order. And then, Susan, we were talking about shareholders. We talk about shares. Could you just repeat that question? You asked the second part about shares. As we close, as we take a 5-minute break, what was your question around the shares? Sorry, I just want to make sure that I have it right. We talk about the removal of shares, isn't it? Shareholders. Removal of shareholders. Susan, you there? Oh.
Yes, I've just put in the chat. Yeah, if I want to exit some shareholders who had equity in my company or who were registered as directors when the company was beginning, and now we are no longer partners.
Okay, that's okay. I'll be writing down your questions. Yeah, I just wanted to be sure about that. So removal it's not a difficult process. Ordinarily, what happens is that you get the best method is to get the person to sell their shares to the remaining shareholders. So this person will just sell, and say if they own like 20%, they get the shares, they sell. You execute what we call a share transfer agreement. These shares are transferred to whoever wants to buy those shares. You can buy them at the value, at nominal value, or you can agree on a value depending on how well the company is doing. Of course, the company is valued. Yeah. So you can purchase. That's the easiest way. The other way is if someone does not want to sell their shares, but you feel like they need to exit the company, it is possible to do that through court. if you can, for justifiable reasons or cause, or for just cause, if you can show why it's not, because a share is property. It's like owning a building. It's like, someone should not be deprived of their property without just cause. So sometimes the court will allow situations where, say, for example, someone is a shareholder who has passed on without, has passed on, has not transferred the shares are passed on, say, to their legal representatives, or they have, now what happens, they pass on to the legal representative, but in a situation where someone has no legal representative, all their descendants are passed on or whatever, and they had nothing in their will. So it would be possible to ask the court to transfer those shares, use its power to transfer those shares. In other instances, maybe someone has gone, is of unsound mind or something, and that shouldn't be, but just know it has to be one of those situations which is which affects the running of the business. Otherwise, the courts do not ordinarily grant. So it's a very, very rare instance, but the easiest one is usually by agreement of the parties. So you just sign an agreement, file transfer forms at the company's registry, file resolution, and the other documents that you attach, including a share valuation report, etc. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritties of that, but basically it's that. So having said that, I think we should take our break. Let's just take a 5-minute break, if that's okay, everyone. Then we'll come back. When we come back, we're going to look at the organs of the company. We'll discuss. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Mhm. Uh, Hi everyone, I'm back. How are you? Are we back? Can we start?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right, let's do this. Well, we've gone through the hierarchy in a company, so the hierarchy of authority. I hope that's clear because we talked about the board of directors, management. Yeah, I think I can quickly, go through management and employees. I talked about them, but maybe not in as much detail as the first two. The management is basically the officers of the company. So this include the company secretary, the CEO, human resource manager, chief technology officer, C-suite executives. Include all C-suite type of executives. So these are the people that basically are involved in the day-to-day running of the business. Board of directors provide strategic oversight. Management, we shall get into the details in a bit. Managers, that's what they do. Employees report to the management. So this can include, say, an IT officer. It can include sales staff, marketing staff. These are the people that if you may, to say these are the foot workers, they're actually on ground. These are the people that, take charge of the day-to-day running of the business. So having said that, this actually informs the next slide. The slide, talks about, we're talking about let me mute my phone. Yeah, so talks about the organs of the company, which we've talked about. We've said shareholders, board of directors, management, would like to talk a little more about how these different organs actually manage the company. From a legal perspective, management of a company looks like this. I've talked about the general meeting, which is also referred to as the annual general meeting. It's an annual meeting in which the members, I say members, you refer to as members if it's a non-profit, or shareholders if it's for-profit company. So this is a meeting where the members and shareholders meet to appraise the performance of a company over a given year, to elect and dismiss board of directors, to review performance reports such as financial statements, annual reports, and also basically just to agree or validate on the following year's strategic plan, not strategic plan, but business plan, or work plan, or whatever, but basically to agree on the way forward. So the general meeting will be a meeting of the shareholders, plus can include the directors and the management team, including employees. Everyone sits down. You've seen this happen often in nice, expensive, hotels, plush hotels. People sit down and have these meetings and reflect on the year gone. The other type of meeting is what we call a statutory meeting. This is a general meeting which is required to be held. So each held by the shareholders. It is under Ugandan law, it is mandatory for the shareholders to at least meet once in the lifetime of the company. And that's what is called the statutory meeting. You must meet at least once within 18 months of the incorporation of the company. After that, remember, annual general meetings are not a must. You understand? They're not a must. However, you realize that in interacting with different regulatory authorities and bodies, you find some of them will require you to present an annual report in order to be registered, or in order to get funding, or whatever. You find that investors, whether you are for profit or a non-profit, they may ask you to present documents that would ordinarily have been presented before the annual general meeting, or documents that have been authenticated by the annual general meeting. So whereas it's not statutorily required or legally required, you may find that there are situations where best practice requires you to have these documents together. And it's important to know that as you plan or set up your business or design your management policies and the like, be mindful that we are part of a global village. So what may not be required in Uganda may be required in another country, and who knows, your investors may come from that country. So it's important, in my opinion, as we discussed today, to ensure that as much as possible, we go by international standards. So I may share the good thing is I have both local and international knowledge of what the standards look like. But it's important to conform locally, yes, but most importantly to benchmark against international practice, because we're competing for resources, for investment opportunities with different entities. And it's important that, we conform with international standards, which usually are set by the United Nations and other organizations and bodies. So we'll talk about those in a bit. So that's how, the shareholders are able to participate in the management of the company through the general meeting and the statutory meeting. Then we have another type of meeting called board meetings. Board meetings are meetings of the board of directors, which are held as required in accordance with the articles of association of the company. Yeah. So these are attended only by the board of directors. They can be held according to how the directors feel, or as the need arises, but often a minimum is set in the articles. Usually it will be like every quarter, so a meeting with the directors every quarter. That will be every 3 months. But it's possible for these directors to meet more frequently through meetings called extraordinary meetings. Extraordinary meetings are unscheduled meetings of the board of directors to handle urgent matters or emergencies. So this is how the organs, that is the shareholders and the board of directors, can manage a company. So they're actually the management. Now the directors, we should be mindful, the directors, like I mentioned, provide strategic support. So sometimes they may be involved in the day-to-day running, but often are not involved in the day-to-day running of the company. So this means that they may hire persons to manage the company on their behalf. And these people are usually the management team. So these people the directors would recruit a chief executive officer. So many of us usually hear, or some CEO of this company. So the chief executive officer is a director who participates in the day-to-day running of the company. That's the difference between a director and a chief executive, officer. It's somebody who participates in the day-to-day running. So this person could report to the office, would chair meetings, with the management team. So this person is the person that connects the board of directors with the actual running of the company. And this chief executive officer will be given power to run. He or she will be given power to run the business, and this power shall include the power to appoint officers to help him or her. So this person can take charge in recruiting employees, marketing teams, sales teams, production teams, whatever, innovation teams, all those people, yeah, depending on the needs of the business. So the person takes charge in that, and also, of course, in the appraisal of performance by these different individuals, in implementing the strategic plan. So they sit down, these are the, with creating departments to enhance efficiency within the efficiency in meeting objectives within the organization. So this person identifies and says, I think we need a marketing department, set up a marketing department. So yeah, so they're in charge of that day-to-day, motivating employees. In a football team, for example, the chief executive officer is the manager. Like, if you support Manchester United, this would be, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer will be your chief executive officer. So that is the CEO. The board appoints other individuals. So outside of the CEO, they also appoint the auditor. They have an internal auditor, someone that evaluates how resources are being utilized, just to make sure that they are being utilized in conformity with the law and also agreed policies. They can also appoint both internal and external auditors. Internal auditor sits within the company. External auditor is somebody that comes from the outside. It can be one of the big four audit firms, PricewaterhouseCoopers, or KPMG or Deloitte & Touche, whichever, to come and review the operations of the company. Then they can also appoint the secretary. The secretary is in charge of the communications, legal communications within the company. This person issues notices for meetings. They issue notices for what? For meetings. They document minutes or the action points in, say, the board meetings. Document this into a document called minutes. Keep a file with those minutes for reference, for future reference. Sign off documentation alongside directors. Issue share certificates to shareholders. Engage, be the point of reference between the company and different stakeholders, including the government. They can have, they're like the public relations officer. So these people are the ones that run, that's also the managers of the business generally. Yeah, they are the managers of the business, and they manage it, the day-to-day operations. So yeah, so I don't know if we have any questions around that, but I would like us to first say, reflect and ask ourselves, has your business properly set up the different organs of a company as illustrated above? How have you fared in setting up organs, i.e. The board of directors, the annual general meeting, the management teams, the for the board of directors, the board committees, that is the audit committee, and different committees within the organization. How well are you doing in that regard? Because as I'm aware that we are going, we are seeking investment. So on the 25th, some of us are going to pitch before investors, and they're going to ask us questions. They're going to ask, how have you done, in putting up these structures? Because the organs of a company are what the executive, judiciary, and the parliament are, the legislature are to a country. Those are the organs of government. In a company, the organs of government are the board of directors, the shareholders, the management team. So, well, the board of directors and the shareholders are the main ones because the management team report to the board of directors. But how well have you done? Because if you don't have that in check, it's as if an investor were going to a country without a government. Food for thought. It's as if an investor were going to a country without a government. I don't know if there's any country in the world without a government. There was a country once which in East Africa, which had a challenge. I mean, from about 1993, lots of war and everything. I won't mention the country, but yeah, it was deemed not to have a government. But now it's since put itself together and has a government. Yeah. So very, very important. So I asked that question. Any questions so far? Has your business properly set up the different organs? Feel free to, to give, to share.
Moses, maybe a question.
Yeah.
Well, I would understand this. These are the ideal structures. Now, based on our context, startup, small and growing businesses who, that is a potential direction, but based on where we are, what are some of the critical things that you would recommend? Because it's not something somebody would put, or be able to establish based on, depending on the level that they are. What are some of the aspects that you feel bare minimum in terms of just recommending to start considering or to establish so that we build trust? Thank you.
All right, that's a very good question, Roy. Thank you so much. I'm mindful that these questions are being answered in the context of the need to raise capital, or from a point of what do investors require and what's practical, what's possible, and also different people are in terms of the growth. Different people at different stages of growth. We have different types of companies here in terms of growth, the stage of growth. I think the good news is that legally, when you sign those company forms, they enable each and every business that has incorporated. If you're a company, for example, that is if you're a company, each individual that signs company forms essentially sets up shareholders, sets up a board of directors, because you're required, there's a document called Form 20. You're required to list the names of the directors. So that happens inadvertently without even you having to think. So long as you sign those company forms, you actually have a structure. I guess what I wanted us to look at is, are we actually using those structures? Are we building on them? Are we keeping records, for example, of board minutes? Are we, do the shareholders have share certificates? Do you have those meetings? I think that's what we're trying to discuss today. And in the context of what is necessary, what is not mandatory, or what is practical from a financial standpoint and what is not. The truth is, depending on the nature of investor you approach, if you meet, seed people that, seed investors, you may find they may not be as stringent as, say, VC firms, or angel investors or whatever. You find that if it's seed capital, maybe you're getting it from your family, getting it from your dad, from your mom, from your brother, from a church member. You may find they may not ask too many questions, but and they may not really have an interest in having a say in how you operate your company. They're just giving that money out of love. But beyond that, beyond seed capital, like beyond people, family and the like, when you come to say, people that are investing in order to get a return, VC firms, other types of private equity firms, you find that these people have a duty to other people that have saved money with them. A VC firm has a fund manager who has collected money from from people that had excess money and needed to have it managed on their behalf. So that person is going to have to report to that group of people, that people that have invested in his fund. So therefore, they would want to have a say and control and actually direct how you run your business. And the management, like I've mentioned, management of a company happens through those meetings and having a stake in the company. So to answer you, Roy, a lot of investors would want to sit on the board of directors. So how does it help an investor to sit on the board and not have board meetings? You understand? So like I said, so for a startup, if you're looking at, because it all starts from what is your business plan? What is your business model? I think you had that discussion last week. I saw the schedule. You had, business model generation, development, and business plan development. You look at the nature of a product or service you are developing, and you realize that this is a service that in order to scale, I'm going to have to bring on board some people. Definitely those people will have a vested interest in ensuring that you run your business in the right way, i.e. you must have the organs in place. But if you envision and think, hey, I'm just going to be a sole proprietorship, I'm going to just run a grocery store, I'm doing it for fun. Yeah, I'm going to do it for fun. It's nothing big. It's just for leisure. If I make a profit or not, that doesn't really matter. Then there, perhaps you can be laissez-faire about the organs. But otherwise, my considered opinion, especially working in the financial sector, is that one of the real reasons why people do not get funding into their businesses is because there are no checks and balances in their businesses, and those checks and balances are achieved by establishing organs of the business and ensuring that these different organs are accountable. And those are the things we're going to be discussing. I know we have like an hour 15, but yes, we're going to conclude by discussing today, how do we ensure that those organs are accountable, they are acting with integrity, at the end of the day, they're ensuring that the business furthers its strategic plan, because investors want a return on investment. That is it. That's if you tell an investor, I think Dr. Strive Masio was, I read him like 2 weeks ago saying, if you tell an investor that, hey, I'm not sure that I'm going to make money, then they're like, what's the point? You understand? Unless it's a grant, unless you're working in the development space and it's a grant, but even people that give grants donors are interested in ensuring that their resources are used well. So they have all these monitoring and evaluation tools to ensure that their resources are used well, and they would also be looking at, are you having meetings, the work plans, are you following the work plans, etc. So so Roy, I conclude by saying it's inevitable to have those organs functioning. So Rona asks, can the same individual appear on the shareholders team, board of directors, and management? Yes, legally speaking, that is fine. But also we'll look at what best practice entails. So like I told you, there's the law in Uganda, then there's what internationally has been recognized as good practice. So when we say good practice, it's not binding on you, but your investors are going to look at it. They'll be like, man, you're wearing too many hats, eh? Who holds you accountable? So very, very important. I hope I've answered that, Rona. So let's move on. If that's okay, guys, is it okay to move on? Because now we're running out of time. Let's try and speed up a bit. So now we can talk about corporate governance, huh? So we can now talk about corporate governance. What is corporate governance? Essentially, corporate governance is the system by which companies are directed and controlled That's according to the 1992 Cadbury Reports in the United Kingdom. So like I mentioned to you, that we have corporate governance standards that are in our laws, and then there are a lot of international standards, which, since we are global, we're living in a global community, we ought to know about, and we ought to, to implement where need be. So looking at having gotten that definition, I'd like us to look at history of corporate governance. The first recorded incident of corporate governance was in the 1600s by the British East India Company, which led to the company being nationalized, i.e. that company was set up to manage Britain's imperialistic work in Asia. In Uganda, I think for East Africa, we had the British East African Company. If you remember your history, Frederick Lugard and the like were part of that company, and they used it as a vehicle to pursue Britain's colonial interests. So even within those companies, corporate governance was discussed, and that's where the concept, arose. The Cadbury Reports. So we have different types of reports. So when we say reports, it means that it's not a law, but a group of consultants, a group of business people, or consultants sitting together, stakeholders sat down and developed a report setting standards for business. That is corporate governance standards. So these reports have been issued for many years, each report updating the other. So, so when I talk about the Cadbury Reports, it is a report that was written or chaired, the writing of which was chaired by Sir Adrian Cadbury in 1992. It became the foundation for international best practices in corporate governance. Important to note that these reports are not law, so they're not binding. So no one is going to sue you for not having implemented this. However, depending on the jurisdiction, of course. However, they, like for funding purposes, very important to be aware of this and actually implement, because sometimes we don't get funding because we're not aware of the standards. The other report is the Greenberry Report by Sir Richard Greenberry, looked into and adopted principles on the issue of the remuneration of directors. Someone asked a question earlier, how do I know how much to pay the directors? So this report actually articulates that, which report was incorporated into the Combined Code of Corporate Governance for the UK. So a lot of these reports are finding their way into the law because parliaments, the parliament would sit down and consider the report and say, I think this is good for our it's good for our business environment. Let's actually make it a law. And so you find that these provisions are now put in the Companies Act. And when they get put into the Companies Act, then incorporated, that's the word, then they would become law. So the other type of report, we have the Turnbull Report. Yeah, we have the Turnbull Reports, provided guidance to directors on how to conduct a review of effectiveness of the company's risk management and internal control systems. So this is just a brief history. I'm just going to run through this. You can read these things later. Miners Report looked into the relationship between companies and institutional investors, and was incorporated into the UK Combined Law on Corporate Governance. I think this is really, really important, considering this month we are trying to, pitch to investors. So this report looked into the relationship between companies and institutional investors. Yeah. Higgs report looked into the role and effectiveness of non-executive directors and was also incorporated in the UK's Combined Code on Corporate Governance. You must take note that Uganda borrows a lot from the UK, since common law is actually allowed in Uganda. Like the decisions of the courts of law in England are also binding in Uganda. So yeah, the courts in Uganda can rely on those to make decisions in Uganda. So the Smith Report giving guidance on how to organize audit committees was written. The Tyson report focusing on the recruitment and development of non-executive director was written. So you can see these reports deal with different aspects of management. So you're looking at, how to set up an audit report, how to pay your directors. So basically setting the standards that, should be followed to make boards more accountable, to make shareholders more accountable to communities. We'll shortly talk about an example of where shareholders and directors were not ethical and not accountable. The UK Corporate Governance Code updated the combined code, in particular for financial institutions and banks. Financial institutions and banks really follow these laws because, like I said, their business is sensitive. They're collecting money from people, and their standard, they're held to a really high standard. In the USA, I don't know how many of us have heard about the Enron Scandal. The Enron Scandal happened in, I think just before the turn of the new millennia, where a business called Enron basically forged their financial reports. They seemed to show that the company was doing very well, and yet it was not doing well. The company's auditors participated, worked hand in hand with the directors to doctor the accounts, giving an impression that things were going on well. So the shareholders thought that things are okay when they were not. And yet a lot of money was being siphoned to different offshore accounts and the like. But eventually it was discovered. And when that was discovered, the USA became very strict on issues of financial reporting. And so they set up what they call the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, which was enacted to ensure that there's corporate accountability, especially in the issuance of shares to the public, and disclosure to investors. So you may find that actually, I hope I don't bore people with all of this, but you may find that an investor will ask you to ensure that your governance standards are compliant with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. So, and mostly US type of investors will be asking that question. Then the other one that we look at is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has enacted a set of principles on corporate governance, which are followed by its member states. But closer to home, and I'm going to really focus on this today, in Africa, we also have implemented, come up with our own reports. It's a beautiful report. King Reports of South Africa have set a standard for corporate governance within the African continent and have been emulated across Africa. I love this because I'm big on African solutions for Africans. So King 1, King 2, King 3, King 4 reports. Each report is an improvement on the previous reports. So in case you want to read and you don't want to read all the other laws, you could start with the King report because it's closer to home. It understands the African context for corporate governance issues. So we'd like to focus on that. I have read the King reports, beautiful reports. We shall be looking at some of their provisions in a bit. So having said that, in Uganda, I've already talked about this. The Companies Act provides a code for corporate governance principles, which are compulsory for public companies, but are elective for private companies. Additionally, the Financial Institutions Act, as amended, together the Financial Institutions Act corporate governance regulations also provide for a set of corporate governance principles specific to financial institutions. So in Uganda, you'll be looking at this in case you're like, okay, do I want to comply with Ugandan standards? This is what you look at to ensure. Of course, the financial institutions provisions are for banks. So you need not implement them, but you can borrow from them just to, no one will be against you setting stricter governance provisions, because the stricter it means, the more the more likely the board is going to be accountable. Of course, there's a balance in terms of resources. Implementing strict provisions may also mean, having to put in place greater measures, which would also mean maybe spending, money, So having said that, I think let's look at now corporate governance in businesses, which is, we're now going towards, the end. This is the meat of it. I'll run through this. Corporate governance in businesses. It facilitates, the purpose of corporate governance is that it facilitates effective entrepreneurial and prudent management that can deliver long-term success for the company. So this means that if you manage your company in a proper way, it becomes more effective, and in the long term, you become successful. It also allows for fair and equitable treatment of shareholders. So where you have the right policies, articulating the rights and duties of each organ, then you're able to protect and treat everyone fairly. Then also it's a form of self-regulation and self-assessment, that also through these measures, corporate governance measures, you're able to audit the performance of your company, you're able to hold people accountable internally. So, the shareholders can hold the board accountable. The board can also hold the shareholders accountable in the sense that they can, they can ask questions around how the shareholders are taking decisions and the like. So it's very, very important. So not to mention the fact that it also protects shareholders' interests. At the end of it, like I said, investors are going to be, if they're equity investors, obviously, equity investors are always going to be shareholders, and they would want their interests protected. So as a business, you want as much as possible to ensure that their interests are protected. And this is best achieved by putting in place effective corporate governance procedures and measures. The other thing is, having in place corporate governance measures facilitates transparency and full disclosure. Now, I'd like us to go back and think of the case study we talked about, that is Wezi Enterprises Limited. If you noted, there was, Kato and Waswa are not reporting not providing financial reports. Nakato and Babire, who are the owners, do not know what the business does, or how the business is performing, So you can see there's no transparency and there's no full disclosure. So let's run through this. What are the key tenets of corporate governance? If you have a question, feel free to ask. But key tenets of corporate governance include integrity, competence, responsibility, accountability, and transparency. What do we mean by integrity? It's expected that the board of directors, the shareholders, will act in utmost integrity. Yeah. You want as much as possible to do things the right way. You don't want to end up like Enron. Or your competence, the board of directors, the shareholders will have the competence to run the business. Remember, Kato and Waswa are 23 years of age. One is a lawyer, one is a teacher. They're running a supermarket. Do they have the competence? That's something that one needs to, ask. If you're running a technology company, yes, you may not be a software engineer yourself, but have you hired people with the competence to actually run a technology company? So that is very, very important. These are the things that investors are going to be looking at before they can give you their funds. They're going to look at and say, okay, I'm going to give you my funds, but you actually have the competence to meet the targets that you're talking about. You talked about this return on investment. At time T, you've pitched to me, I've looked at your pitch deck, but hey, I can't see the team that is going to take us from point A to point B. Leadership is very important. Responsibility. How is the company operating? Are you only after money? Are you only after money? Is money the end? Does the end justify the means? We've seen situations like where Shell, BP, Shell in Nigeria. You've had the situation of the Ongoniland, where there have been, oil spills, communities have been destroyed because directors, shareholders are just only after money. So can you act with responsibility? And if you fail, can you be accountable? That's what we're talking about, accountability. Transparency. Can we believe what you're saying as a company? Or should we just, or do we, are you always hiding behind a veil of deceit? We should be, the community or the society will connect with a company that is seen to be forthright in its speech and in its engagements and in its business. So let's look at how we can apply corporate governance in our businesses. Now, this is really about, the tire hits the road here. The rest has just been theoretical, a lot of it. But here we're looking at how do you go about doing this? We formalize and disclose. So one of the things you want to do is formalize and disclose the functions to be carried out by the board and those that will be conducted out by the management. I.e., this means after you've set up your company, now either through, if you have the expertise to, you can do it yourself, put in place policies, have a human resource policy, have a financial policy, have a risk management policy, have an emergency crisis and emergency policy. Just make sure that you have all these policies in place in order to ensure that are clear about what can be done, what can't be done, who's responsible for what. Yeah, that's very, very important. Someone has asked, under what circumstances can the directors host the shareholders, e.g., when Steve Jobs was pushed out of his own company? That can never happen. It's shareholders who host shareholders. So it's shareholders. So it could be that the directors are also shareholders. So in that regard, the directors will be acting in their capacity as shareholders in order to vote someone out. But voting rights are often limited to directors. But it's also a requirement. Sometimes in the law, it's allowed for directors to have what we call qualification shares. So a director would have shares in the company, such as to allow them to have a vested interest. So, if someone is both a shareholder and director, then you find that it's in their interest to act in the interest of the company than if someone was just a director. So it's what they call having skin in the game, yeah? So you'd want someone with skin in the game. But most times the voting of, voting people out, that would be the shareholders at the annual general meeting. Yeah, hope I've answered that. Thank you. So as we go along, the other way to ensure that you have good corporate governance is you should have a board which has independent directors. There are different types of directors. You have executive directors. They are people who are a part of the day-to-day running of the company. Then you have independent directors. These are people that are not part of the day-to-day running, but you rely on them to share an outside perspective. Because you can get as a director, your mind can get clouded with because you're inside the process. But you need someone who can look from the outside and say, hey, you guys, by the way, in our company we do this. So it's nice to have a mix of executive and independent directors. And for that reason, it's also good to have non-executive members, generally speaking. So they give you an outside perspective. They're not auditors per se, but they just give you an outside or a different perspective. So as much as possible, investors are looking at that. They want to look at and see, do these people have a mix of skills in terms of, the array of qualifications? Do you have a mix of lawyers, engineers, teachers, whatever? And a mix is usually nice because it allows different perspectives which can propel the company forward. But also it's good to have external parties who are most times considered, they are impartial in their judgment. So that's going to be looked out for by investors. The other thing is also the roles of the chairman and CEO should not be exercised by the same person. I think we've had, I don't know how many of us are familiar with the role of a chairman. The chairman normally chairs the meetings of the board of directors, but it's possible that the chairman is the CEO. but it's advised that that should not be the case in order to ensure that there's a separation of powers. You know, the chairman has the ability to vote in case there's a stalemate by the board of directors. If you say you have 2-2 and you know, there are 5 directors and one of them is the chair can vote and swing the vote to a particular issue, you know? So it's important for you to separate powers. Kind of think about this sort of like how the government operates, you know, the executive, judiciary, the parliament, the legislature. You see how President Museveni is answerable to the parliament over some issues. And also the judiciary makes appearances before, you know, sometimes can make appearances before the legislature, but also members of parliament can be sued and brought before the courts. Even, you know, the people in the community can sue the government before the courts. So it's a way of checking different people. The more the checks, the better and the safer an investor will feel in putting their money in a company. So when putting their money in a company, sorry. The other thing that I want us to look at is the board should establish committees, generally speaking, audit committees, nomination committees. It's important to have those committees. These are like small working groups to allow for deeper synthesis of issues, proper discussion of issues, to ensure that correct and evidence-backed decisions are taken. So these groups can do, you know, review reports, analyze reports, sit down together, you know, all of that is what is required. The other thing is, this is just broadly speaking, there's so many requirements, but I've just picked these ones out of different reports, you know, like I talked about corporate governance reports. It's important to establish a code of conduct for directors yeah, for the different people in the organization, to ensure integrity, to ensure good conduct. Very, very important to ensure that things are run in a good and ethical manner. It's also important to ensure that, you know, there's financial reporting. These reports are presented by the board of directors and that they are authenticated by the board of directors as reports belonging to the company and have been drawn by the directors. So this is very important. I think you've seen in some reports sometimes where the directors sign and say, these reports are a true and fair view of the company's financial position. So these reports include, you know, their, you know, things like the balance sheet, the income statement, and the like. So we move on. You know, it's important. I've already talked about, you know, setting up committees. It's important to have different policies, accounting policies, establish procedure and policies ensuring compliance with the international financial reporting standards. So have policies that are, you know, accounting policies and legal policies and all policies that meet international standards. When your policies meet international standards, then investors feel safe and they say, oh, I understand this. This is how we do it in America. So if this and this happens, then this is the consequence. So they should be able to they should be able to trace, trace procedure for, you know, managing disputes within the organization. They should be able to understand how to, you know, bring forward their grievances, you know, in case there's yeah. So all of those are important, and that's what investors are looking at. They're like, we want to see that. It needs to be clear. Then the other thing is, you know, you need to also, as much as possible, get your accounts audited. That's why it's sometimes you'll see investors asking for audited accounts, and they may ask for accounts going 3 years backwards, you know, 3 years back, sorry. And so very, very important to have an audit. An auditor basically is saying, I am an external party. I've come in, I've looked at the affairs of the business, and the business is running very, very well. So that is that is okay. I've looked at the financial statements, etc., and everything is clean. Your resources have been used well. The dividends that have been declared are actually what is supposed to be declared. They're not, you know, they have not been undervalued or under declared, you know. So there you go. So risk management policies, that is very, very important. You know, performance evaluation of the board, of its committees, of individuals, of executives, of everyone. Yeah? In Kenya, they'll say kila kitu, you know, everyone. So provide disclosure, you know, in relation to the company's remuneration policies may be important to disclose. Be clear about those in contracts. For public companies, there'll be reporting standards, you know, required by, say, the Uganda Securities Exchange and the Capital Markets Authority, actually the Capital Markets Authority. Very important to comply with all of those. Just to ensure that everything is clear. You know, there's nothing dirty in the what? In the business. So have a hierarchy, be clear about that hierarchy internally. That's basically a managerial hierarchy. Have a clear matrix of who reports to who, who's answerable to who has power over this, who has responsibility. All those things are very, very important to talk about. Now, I'd like us to reflect. We're going on towards the end. I'll give us time to ask questions. I think now let's conclude and then you can ask all the questions omnibus. I want us to reflect. We shall discuss this at the end. How does Waverley Enterprises Limited measure? Or you could substitute the word Waverley Enterprises with your business. How does your business measure against the corporate governance standards we've just talked about? I know we've run through them, but they are broad. I told you can find all of them in the King 4 report. I couldn't pick all of them and put them there. There are too many, so many pages. But I just picked up the key ones. So those are the things we want to be looking at. How do you measure as a business? Can we be honest with each other? So reflect, see, go back to the drawing board if need be. Then we want to talk about ethics. All through my discussion, you've seen the interconnectedness of governance, management. You see that there's a connection. We say that a company is not capable of running itself. It must be run by people. You understand? But these people are, you know, they're individuals with different belief systems, different culture, different training, different ages. So all these people come together to run this company. But as we run company, you know that society expects us to behave in a particular way. I've already mentioned Enron, Shell BP in Nigeria, how they did not behave well. And ethics has become a key thing. Entrepreneurs, I mean, investors are going to come in, but they want to know you. I know Dr. Strive Masiwa said this. One time when one of his first, the first fundings he got, he went to the US to meet the investor. And this investor served, you know, he served him tea and lunch. They had lunch together. And day one went, they never talked about Strive's business. Day two went, they never talked about Strive's business. Day three went, Strive was wondering like, hey, man, want us to look at the pitch deck, you know, to discuss the hard things. You know, what are we doing just taking tea and having lunches? At the end of day three, this man comes and the investor says, you know what? I'm going to give you funding. Strive is like, but you've not looked at my financial projections and my pitch deck. This man is like, no, I have people who have done that. I have people I hire to read before you even came to the US, I had conducted due diligence on your company. I already know what you do. I don't need to know that. I wanted to know you, the person, what you believe in, what are your ethics, what are your professional ethics. And these 3 days have allowed me to see who you are and know who you are. And therefore, I feel comfortable working with you. And then Strive said, what's more important than having a great business plan? It's having a great personality and having great ethics. And so what is ethical behavior? Integrity, honesty, trustworthiness, fidelity and confidentiality, fairness and transparency, caring for others, responsible citizen, accountable, personal ethics. So we've talked about there's obviously a corporation is made up of individuals, but then at the end of it, it zeroes down to the person. You know, these individuals are a group and they act as a group. At the end of the day, it comes down to you as a person. Yeah, what do you believe in it? What do you believe in? Someone may choose, you may have a great business plan, great business model, but the investor won't come in because, hey, they just don't like what they have seen in terms of your personal ethics. So most times people are seeking for justice and fairness, people who are just and fair, people who have respect for others, people who are benevolent, i.e. they are kind, people that comply with the law. You know, American investors especially, I'll have a law called the US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. I did a summer course around 2013. I attended classes with US lawyers, and we're basically doing a comparative study of Uganda's anti-corruption laws versus US anti-corruption laws. And the US government is so strict in the sense that it basically can hold investors and US business owners accountable for corrupt practices committed outside US soil. In Uganda, that's not possible. We only hold people accountable for corruption crimes committed within Uganda. But the US, its legal arm is so long that you'll find investors are very, very careful. If they smell, US investors, they smell a hint of corruption, they're gonna be over the horizon, head over heels, running away from you. So they want compliance with the law. And so you have to be a person of integrity. At the end of the day, when we're pitching on 25th, they're going to be looking at us as individuals. Who are we? And then that comes down to professional ethics. I've already talked about this. You know, integrity, impartiality, objectivity, professional competence, avoiding conflicts of interest. Can you do this? How well is your business doing in this regard? Are you complying with the law? Have you filed your tax returns, annual returns? You know, are you doing all your filings? Or are you saying, oh, I'm going to do that later? Trust me, you're not going to get an investment if that's the case. Well, if you do, you'll be quite fortunate. So basically, ethics in business refers. Business ethics is an area of corporate responsibility where businesses are legally bound and socially obligated to conduct business in an ethical manner. So business ethics is based on personal values and standards of each person. I think last week most of us saw Mark Zuckerberg appearing before, I think the US, I don't know if it was the Congress, I didn't really follow it fully, but appearing before either the Senate or the Congress to answer about, how Facebook, all these things Facebook is doing, some people believe that it's unethical, some of its products and services, and how those products are being, issued, and how people are being, So yeah, they think, some people say, oh, it's too addictive, blah, 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 blah. You have all these AI in there, picking out people's personal information and blah, 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 blah. So those are some of the ethical concerns. And you can see those ethical concerns have brought Mark Zuckerberg before the government to answer. So you can see ethics is very, very important in business. Then why should we have good ethics? I think I've already talked about it. When you have good ethics, you become an ideal business. And also it prevents you from being, ending up in jail. When you're in jail, you may not be in position to run your business effectively. Very, very important. So things that you would want to avoid, things like false reporting. If your financial reports are not up, correct, like Enron, you're going to be in big, big trouble, not only with the government, most importantly with the government, but also with the investors who are going to quickly pull out their investment. Yeah, then stakeholders, even the public are just going to be, they're going to be wary to do business with you. you've seen businesses crashing because the public no longer trust them. I don't know if some of us can give examples. In our discussion after this, you can give examples if you have a few in mind. Other thing is, so the other unethical standards are non-compliance with laws, rules, and codes. Very important. Follow what the government says. You may not like the government that is in, the government that's in power, but it's your duty to follow their laws. Otherwise, go and find a new jurisdiction. That's what happens. So, yeah, in conclusion, I'd like us to reflect on how we are doing with our ethical standards. Also, we can look at Waverley Enterprises and ask, how could they have done better? Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to say thank you for listening to me. Name is Moses Ngorok. You can reach out to me on email or WhatsApp or through Roy in case you want to talk more. At this juncture, I would like to open it up to discussion, Q&A, anything, comments, kila kitu. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Moses, for the session. It is very insightful. Quite a number of things which are new but interesting. I think one question I would like to ask is, if a business, or naturally most businesses don't start with this kind of structure, which is ideal, how would you recommend a company to take a step-by-step approach towards having such in place? Maybe that's a question I would like to ask. Thank you.
Okay, so I think the first thing would be to evaluate your resources, because at the end of the day, it all boils down to resources. And these resources are usually financial. The most important, or the one that is usually scarce, is financial resources. So you ask yourself, okay, do I have the resources? Or maybe before that, you can also ask yourself, okay, what you can basically list these policies in terms of priority. You can ask yourself, what is a priority at the moment? Because yes, all these things are important, but looking at your business, you ask yourself, what needs to be implemented first? First things first. Then you allocate resources to the first things, then you build upon that or those. So I would say, for example, ask yourself, are we having meetings? Are we not? Why are we not having meetings? Can we have these board meetings? Can we organize them? Can they be on Zoom? Because that's even allowed. Can we have them on Zoom instead of meeting at a hotel? Maybe we were scared. We thought these meetings have to be, held in hotels. So I would say it's about ranking these requirements, corporate governance standards. And then, like I said, I'm a big believer in Kaizen, the Kaizen method, that is continuous improvement. Kaizen method by Toyota, looking at continuously improving the policies. But also, it would also be nice to have, as you evaluate, so the first step is evaluation, then seeing, then ranking. So evaluate, where are we, what needs to be done, then rank, this needs to be done first, then allocating resources, and then implementation. So when it's important to get all stakeholders on board and even investors on board, you can actually have honest conversations with investors and say, you know what, we don't actually have these policies in place, but we'd like to put them in place before we bring you on board, or as we bring you on board. Can we allocate some of the investment towards this? So it's important to have that conversation between employees, management team, board of directors, shareholders. Everyone has an honest discussion and say, this is where we want to get. But in order to get there, let's put in place these policies. Let's start with this, and then you can get an advisor to help you with the process. If you don't have the skills and expertise in-house, Yeah.
Thank you. There is a question from Mr. Alex Okello.
Yes, Alex, hi.
Alex, feel free to unmute and
ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much, Moses. A very beautiful. In a situation, yes, you can hear me now, I think.
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
So in a situation where there's a kind of like conflict of
now you're not clear. You're saying where there's a conflict of interest in a situation. I had that, but not the words that follow.
Yeah. You find we have board of directors, and so three of us and yes. Okay. I think maybe if my network is bad, let me just write in a chat.
Okay, now you're clear. You can actually ask now. I think now you're clear. Yeah.
Saying a situation where we have three directors,
yeah.
Two of them are individual, one of them is a company. Now, the directors who come in as a company, they are not agreeing with some things together as into the company. And so we find ourselves struggling. Like, for example, decisions on how we need to expand the business. Some of us want to go into maybe a clinical direction and a hospital. And then others are saying, no, we have just to stay as a pharmacy. Now, in such situations, what do you do? And you brought to them to guide and give you guidance. What do you do? Thank you.
All right. That's okay. It's true. Thank you for that question, Alex. It's a good question. The board of directors are ordinarily, their operations or how they make decisions is governed by the Articles of Association. So the powers that they have, they provide in the Articles of Association. So ordinarily when we register a company, we have a template for Articles of Association, but companies are allowed to modify these articles to suit their circumstances. So these articles will cover things such as how voting is done by the board of directors. What does it take for a resolution to pass or to be passed by the board of directors? Usually the standard is 2/3, 2 out of 3. So now in your situation, if all board of directors would have a voting power, so it would be 2 out of 3 directors. So if you get 2/3 majority, then a decision is passed. So you don't need to have a unanimous decision. However, there'll be some issues or matters depending on how you draft the Articles of Association, which will require a unanimous decision or 3/4 majority. So sometimes it all comes down to what's the issue at hand. Has that issue been addressed in the Articles of Association? What do the Articles of Association say about how the voting or voting power is exercised in regard to different issues? But generally speaking, the standard, at least here in Uganda, we usually set is like, a 2/3 majority, 2 out of 3, that works. Or it can be, or half, at least if you have 2 directors, at least half of the directors. I know, it just depends. So it comes down to the Articles of Association. So that's why it's important, actually, to be honest, that your lawyer actually works on, you work together on the policies to make sure that there's a congruence, there's basically uniformity across the board. There's a red line through all the documents. You don't want one document saying one thing and the other saying the other. So you don't have a conflict of laws. So yeah, I hope I've answered. I don't know. Alex, any further thoughts?
Yeah, that's really what I was trying to look at, because it's a scenario we are kind of facing. So we would not want to vote against each other because for some reason we are still stronger. But for somehow, maybe on my personality, I would want working together on this. But again, we have to make a decision. So that's really, and really the question Roy asked also, how there are some things definitely we are not doing when in your discussion, the discussion we're talking about how do we evaluate the members in the governance team. We have never evaluated that. So I don't know whether that's a very strong thing when we come into pitching and how we can go about evaluating them. Sometimes we even fear to bring it up because you brought them to support you. Now, how do you begin to say we are evaluating your performance?
Yeah. I think that's true in terms of like performance appraisal. Is something I think I find that a performance appraisal is easier to do. Obviously, this would be a question that is better answered by a human resource manager. But generally speaking, performance appraisal is easier when there's a document, a policy saying at time T, all of us shall be appraised. I think it's when you have a policy in place, it's easy to make reference. One thing I've found, as lawyers, we like to make reference. It's not me, it's section 5 of the Companies Act which requires you. So that way you exonerate yourself from responsibility. So if you have like a policy in place, you can just, when you're writing an email, you say, guys, in accordance with the human resource policy number this, it says that all directors, all managers should appear for a performance appraisal every, biannually. So you find that no one is going to have no one's going to fight that because it's in the policy. So that's the beauty of having written material, written policies, because that allows you to like make reference and also just allows for continuity, if you're not there, someone else can make reference and performance appraisal happens and it's healthy. Personally, to be honest, it's also a scary experience to be told what you are not doing very well. I am also still trying to learn how to accept feedback, but it's very, very important if we want to grow. We need to accept feedback. Yeah, thank you.
There's a question from Emmanuel. Please go ahead.
Hello, thank you very much for the presentation.
You're welcome.
I think it has helped me to answer two questions that I've been puzzling with. One is why most of our companies or businesses don't grow into multi-million businesses, why they don't. I think what you shared today partly answers the essence of involving so many people at different levels doing the work. But then also too, the question of why most of our businesses don't go to the next generation when they're still very strong. So it's about the structure, about the competence of the people that have been brought on board. But also that maybe businesses don't go there because of the question of the trust deficit about the people that you're bringing on board. Because you get to realize that there are a lot of, most of the actual work, most of the tire meeting the road is actually the board of directors, the management committee, the employees, and then the vision bearer, the shareholder is at the top there, a little detached. So when you look at the pool of people you have to bring on board and your success depends on them, I think that's where maybe some entrepreneurs do not take that step. But also there is the knowledge gap with people just don't know. Like honestly, today I've learned many new things.
Glory to God. Glory to God.
Thank you, Emmanuel. My question. Yeah. Now, my current business is a sole proprietorship. It's registered as a business name. So I should not actually be taking time to come to Kampala and pitch because they'll say Mr. Kenya on this you don't know. Yes, I have a board of governors, I have a management committee, I'm a shareholder, but I'm in the board of directors. Is it this pitching process, can it allow one to begin to improve going forward so that one can meet the needs and the interest of the investors?
Yeah. That's a great question, Emmanuel. Actually, I think you should still come. You should still come and pitch. You should still come and pitch because if the investors like your business or your concept, whatever you come up with, they will be able to. You can still set up a company. Setting up a company takes like just a week, 5 working days. You can have your company running. So even between now and 25th, in case you want to incorporate a company, that's fine. But if the investors like your idea, it's still possible to go ahead and be honest with them and say, you know what, would like to set up a vehicle for this. And if they allow, of course, Roy will advise you. Roy is the expert in that, in dealing with those investors, but depending on what they request. But I would say my advice would be, come to Kampala nonetheless, because the investors are interested in the idea. They can always construct a house for the idea, which is the company. So, of course, to be honest, there are also some constraints you would face, because maybe say, your reports will be for sole proprietorship and the like, but I think they can still rely on those to make a decision. So if you ask me on the balance of probability, I would say please come to Kampala. Please come, travel.
Maybe just to respond to Emmanuel, whenever you get, so one, it depends on the investment. If it is equity, that means you are giving a bit of stake to an external investor. It means when they come in, you will have to agree on them structuring. Many times we've seen an entrepreneur, if they don't have a board, they agree on a board and they agree on some of these structures in place. So that shouldn't be a deterrent. The most important thing is having a good business model and a good business that works and has the potential to grow. And obviously, that's why you are seeking external engagement to actually take it to the next level. And taking it to the next level involves maybe finance, but also internal structures, which based on who is coming in, those structures naturally have to be put in place to allow accountability, transparency for all the related stakeholders. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Roy. That really explains it, That explains it properly. Yeah, that explains it properly, yeah? Any further questions, any thoughts on this?
Maybe some feedback from the participants. How has it been? Do you think it was so deep? Do you think it was relevant? We had to be considerate about a number of things, but we really wanted also to show you the path that you need to take. So feel free to share on the chat. How was it for you personally? Was it eye-opening? Does it give you an impression of where you need to go? Or did it, please just put some of your thoughts or ideas on or feedback or comments for purposes of improving the next sessions. Thank you very much.
Right. Yeah, feel free to share feedback so that we can improve. All right, Roy, seems, yeah, seems we're good.
All right, I think, well, if there's no feedback, We appreciate you for making time. I think that will
Thank you,
mark
everyone.
the end of today's session. Let's connect tomorrow, where we shall be covering more about, I think we shall be doing, Moses, what's the plan for tomorrow, based on the schedule?
Okay. Yeah, tomorrow we're looking at protecting intellectual property in business, understanding financial options. Yeah.
Yeah, so how can you protect your idea? Remember, some of us have unique ideas and feel, you know what, can we share this idea out? How best do we share, etc.? So protecting intellectual property and understanding various financial options. So based on where you are as a business, what are some of the financial options to allow you achieve the various goals that you have? So yeah, that's what we are covering tomorrow. Join us on time so that we can give Moses appropriate time to actually share and equally discuss some of the aspects that you need to know. Thank you very much, and have a blessed day.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye to everybody.
Okay.
Bum, 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 bum.